I stood at the altar in my dream dress, looking out at the empty seats where my parents should have been. They'd chosen their pride over their daughter. But when they saw who walked me down the aisle instead, they realized they'd made the biggest mistake of their lives. If you've ever felt abandoned by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, this story will hit you right in the heart. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell because you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Trust me, the ending will leave you speechless. My name is Lisa, and I never thought I'd be telling this story. Growing up, I was the perfect daughter, or at least I tried to be. My father worked at the biggest bank in our town, always impeccably dressed in his pressed suits and polished shoes. My mother taught third grade at the elementary school, known for her strict but fair classroom management. They had this vision of what my life should look like, and honestly, for the longest time, I bought into it too. I was their only child, which meant all their hopes and dreams were pinned on me like badges of honor they expected me to wear. College degree from a prestigious university? Check. Job at a respectable company? Check. Dating someone from the right family with the right background? Well, that's where things got complicated. I met Tom on a Tuesday morning at the little coffee shop downtown. I'd been rushing to work, juggling my purse, laptop bag, and a stack of reports when I collided with someone coming out of the shop. Papers scattered everywhere, and my latte ended up splattered across the sidewalk. I was mortified, already calculating how late I'd be for my morning meeting. But this guy, this gentle, kind-eyed man, just smiled and started helping me gather my things. He bought me a new coffee, refused to let me pay him back, and even helped me organize my papers while we talked. Tom wasn't wearing a business suit. His hands had calluses from honest work, and there was motor oil under his fingernails. He owned a small auto repair shop that his father had started, and he spoke about it with such pride and passion. Most people in my circle would have looked down on him, but there was something about Tom that drew me in. Maybe it was the way he really listened when I talked, or how he remembered little details about my day when we started texting. He wasn't trying to impress me with expensive dinners or fancy cars. Instead, he'd bring me homemade sandwiches when I had to work late, or show up with my favorite ice cream when I'd had a rough day. When I finally worked up the courage to introduce him to my parents 3 months later, I should have known it wouldn't go well. The moment Tom walked into our pristine living room in his clean but simple clothes, I saw my father's jaw tighten. My mother's smile was so forced it looked painful. Throughout dinner, they peppered him with questions that felt more like an interrogation than getting to know their daughter's boyfriend. "So, Tom," my father said, cutting his steak with surgical precision, "what are your long-term career goals?" But the more time I spent with Tom, the more I realized my parents were wrong. He might not have had a college degree, but he was smarter than most people I knew. He could diagnose complex engine problems, run a successful business, and had more emotional intelligence in his little finger than some of the suitable men my parents preferred. When I got food poisoning and spent 2 days miserable on my couch, Tom didn't just bring me soup. He cleaned my entire apartment and did my laundry without being asked. When my grandmother passed away suddenly, Tom drove 4 hours with me to the funeral, held me while I cried, and somehow knew exactly what to say to comfort not just me, but my grieving relatives. He didn't try to fix everything or offer empty platitudes. He just showed up, completely and authentically. 18 months after that collision outside the coffee shop, Tom proposed. Not at some fancy restaurant or exotic location, but in my tiny apartment kitchen while we were making breakfast together on a Sunday morning. He'd been acting nervous all weekend, and I thought maybe he was having doubts about us. Then he got down on one knee right there between the stove and the refrigerator, pulled out a simple but beautiful ring, and asked me to marry him with tears in his eyes. "Lisa," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "I know I can't give you everything you might want, but I can promise you everything I have. I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it to you." I said yes before he even finished talking. The ring wasn't the biggest or most expensive, but it was chosen with thought and love. Tom had asked my best friend Rachel what style I liked, had saved up for months, and picked something that was uniquely me. I was floating on air when I called my parents to share the news. I should have known better. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice cold and distant. "Lisa, please tell me you're joking." "Mom, I'm engaged. I'm marrying the man I love. I thought you'd be happy for me." "Happy?" My father had picked up the extension and I could hear the disappointment dripping from his voice. "Lisa, we raised you better than this. We gave you every advantage, every opportunity, and this is how you repay us? By throwing your life away on some mechanic?" The conversation deteriorated quickly. They used words like settling, and disappointing, and beneath you. They questioned my judgment, my intelligence, even my sanity. By the time I hung up, I was crying so hard I could barely breathe. Tom found me on the kitchen floor an hour later, still clutching the phone and sobbing. He didn't say, "I told you so," or get angry at my parents for hurting me. He just held me and let me cry, stroking my hair and whispering that everything would be okay. Planning our wedding became an exercise in heartbreak. Every venue we visited, every decision we made was shadowed by my parents' absence. They refused to contribute financially, which we'd expected. Tom's family had been nothing but welcoming from day one. His parents, both retired now, had immigrated from Ireland when Tom was just a baby. They'd worked multiple jobs, saved every penny, and built a life through sheer determination and love. They treated me like the daughter they'd always wanted, but never had. Tom's father taught me how to change my oil, and his mother shared her secret cookie recipe that had been in their family for generations. But there was still something missing. The morning of our wedding, as I sat in the bridal suite getting my hair done, I kept glancing at the door, hoping against hope that maybe my parents would show up. Maybe they'd realize that love mattered more than social status. Maybe they'd remember that I was their daughter, and that should count for something. Rachel, my maid of honor, noticed my distraction. "They might still come," she said gently, but we both knew better. That's when Tom knocked on the door. "Lisa, there's someone here who wants to see you." Standing in the hallway was my grandfather, my father's father, who I hadn't seen in almost 2 years. Grandpa Pete was 83 years old, a bit stooped but still sharp as a tack. He'd been estranged from my parents for reasons I'd never fully understood, something about their judgmental attitudes and forgetting where they came from. "Hello, sweetheart," he said, opening his arms for a hug. "I heard my granddaughter was getting married today, and I couldn't miss that." I burst into tears all over again, but these were different tears. Grandpa Pete had always been my favorite relative, the one who taught me to fish and let me help in his garden. He'd told me stories about immigrating from Poland with nothing but hope and determination, working his way up from factory worker to foreman, and building a life through hard work and perseverance. "Grandpa, how did you even know about the wedding?" I asked. He winked. "Tom called me. Smart young man, that one. He knew you needed family here today, and he was right." It turned out Tom had tracked down my grandfather's phone number and called him the week before. He'd explained the situation, told Grandpa Pete how much I missed him, and asked if he'd consider walking me down the aisle. My grandfather had agreed immediately and driven 3 hours to be there. "Your father was a fool to miss this day," Grandpa Pete said, straightening my veil with gentle hands. "But his loss is my honor." During the dinner, my parents approached hesitantly. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by their own regret. Grandpa Pete was sitting at our table, regaling us with stories from the old country, when he noticed his son approaching. "Hello, Dad," my father said quietly. "Robert," Grandpa Pete replied with a nod. "Helen." He acknowledged my mother with cool politeness. We're sorry we're late," my mother stammered, looking at me with desperate eyes. "We made a mistake." A terrible mistake. Grandpa Pete set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. "Yes, you did. You let your pride rob you of your daughter's happiness. You missed one of the most important days of her life because you couldn't see past your own narrow expectations." My father's voice was barely a whisper. We thought we were protecting her. From what? From a man who loves her completely? From someone who treats her like she's the most precious thing in the world? Grandpa Pete's voice was firm but not unkind. I've been watching that boy with Lisa today. The way he looks at her, the way he takes care of her. That's real love, son. The kind your mother and I had. The kind that builds a lifetime of happiness. My parents both looked at Tom, really looked at him, for perhaps the first time. They saw how he'd made sure I had everything I needed throughout the day, how he'd thanked every single person who'd helped with the wedding, how he'd been respectful and kind even knowing they'd hurt me deeply. Tom, my father said, extending his hand, I owe you an apology. And more than that, I owe you gratitude for making my daughter so happy. Tom shook his hand without hesitation. Mr. Johnson, I love Lisa more than anything in this world. I know I'm not what you envisioned for her, but I promise you I'll spend my life trying to be worthy of her. You already are, my mother said through her tears. We can see that now. We were so wrong.